I'm Jon-Paul Dyson, Director of the International Center for the History of Electronic Games at the Strong Museum.
And I'm Shannon Symonds, Curator for Electronic Games at the Strong Museum.
And this is every iconic video game for the last 40 years.
When deciding which game to pick each year, we looked at a variety of factors. The game had to be iconic. People had to recognize it. It had wide geographic reach and was played all across the world. And it had cultural significance with a lot of people even outside the gaming industry.
1979, Asteroids. In the 1970s, Atari ruled the arcade scene, but in the late 1970s, competition came from Japan in the form of Space Invaders. Atari needed a follow-up. Asteroids was the answer. This rock-blasting game featuring asteroids hurtling through space was inspired by the original Space War game from the early 1960s, but it proved to be a gold mine for Atari. Raking in the quarters, both in the arcade and eventually when ported to home console, Asteroids combined this amazing fluidity of movement with excitement. The sound ramped up, the action ramped up, the asteroids came faster and faster. It generated coins by the bucketful and really made a lot of money for Atari and brought internal fame to Ed Log and Lyle Raines, the developers.
1980, Pac-Man. When creator Toru Iwatani was eating a pizza and removed a slice, he got this image of this yellow ball going across the screen, eating pellets. And he thought that that would be something that would appeal widely across genders, across ages. Not only did Pac-Man do well in the arcade, but it became the first game to incite this licensing craze. Pac-Man's fun for everyone. All you have to do is go around a maze. And it also had these wonderful ghosts. In 1982, Ms. Pac-Man became one of the first iconic female video game characters.
1981, Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong introduced to video games two of its most important characters. The first was the game's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, who saved Nintendo when they're desperately looking for a game to replace their failed radar scope with a delightful game featuring a character called Jumpman, who saved his damsel in distress from the clutches of an evil gorilla. The second character was, of course, Jumpman, who we know as Mario. Without Donkey Kong, there may be no Mario, and video games would be very different than they are today.
1982, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. E.T. is an example of a video game that's remembered for all the wrong reasons. It's considered one of the biggest commercial failures of the entire video game industry. It only took 5.5 weeks to develop due to licensing rights and trying to get the game out for the holiday season. The game just didn't play well. Legend had it that after the game's failure, Atari buried thousands upon thousands of these cartridges in a landfill in the New Mexico desert. And that turned out to be true during a 2014 excavation when all of these cartridges were dug up. E.T. is often credited as a great example of why the video game industry crashed in 1983. A lot of games were being produced and the console market was glutted with games that just weren't selling. The PC industry was also taking off at the time. But when people talk about the crash, they always talk about E.T.
1983, M.U.L.E. When people think of video games, they usually think of the games, not the creators. But when Trip Hawkins founded Electronic Arts in 1982, he wanted to change that. He wanted to bring the developers to the fore. And so, he got some of the best developers in the business to create games. One of those creators was Dan Button, who later became Danielle Button-Berry. Button used to say that no one ever died wishing they spent more time in front of a computer screen and wanted to bring that spirit of a board game to a computer game. M.U.L.E. did this successfully. It's a game designer's game, and one that is still influential today, shaping how we think of multiplayer games for a mass audience.
1984, King's Quest. The game development company Sierra Online became synonymous with graphical adventures, mainly because of the success of the game King's Quest, developed and created by co-founder Roberta Williams, who became one of the most iconic female video game designers. King's Quest combined the best of early text adventure games with pioneering graphics for IBM's latest computer, the PC Junior. King's Quest allowed players a freedom of movement that they hadn't experienced before, including being able to move in front of and behind objects on the screen. It's a game that appealed to everyone, both women and men alike, and people who perhaps weren't even generally fans of computer games at the time. Although the PC Junior itself proved to be a commercial failure, King's Quest found new life when it was ported to other computer systems such as the Commodore 64 and the Apple II line. 1985, Super Mario Bros. Mario first appeared in Donkey Kong as Jumpman. And it wasn't until 1985 when he first appeared in his breakout series.
Super Mario Brothers.
Mario's gameplay became so popular because it was so simple. You scrolled in one direction, jumping over enemies like Koopa Troopers and Goombas, and tried to avoid falling in pits, which made it easy to play for everyone, no matter what level you were. He has appeared in over 200 games on every single Nintendo console ever created. And in a survey in the 1990s, more children recognized Mario even than Mickey Mouse. 1986, The Legend of Zelda. If you first played Zelda on the Nintendo Entertainment System, you might be confused as to why we're introducing this in 1986 instead of 1987. But it actually premiered on the Japanese-only Nintendo Famicom Disk System as a flagship game. It was initially thought of by Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario and Donkey Kong, as a counterpoint, something that was a little bit more complex. It pioneered this open world feel, this miniature garden, where players could explore the entire land of Hyrule openly, without having a discrete path to follow. It gave rise to some of the most iconic lines in video game history. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. The Legend of Zelda is still popular today, even with some of the more recent iterations such as Breath of the Wild and Ocarina of Time.
(1987) Tecmo Bowl. Every year, sports games dominate the bestsellers list. Games like John Madden Football are purchased by millions of players every year, but early on, football games were largely absent from the video game scene. There have been games like Atari's arcade game, Football, but it was a pretty boring, abstract game of X's and O's. Tecmo Bowl brought to video games live action, 2 screens, 4 players. It was a real hit in the arcade, and also when it was ported to the home console at home. Tecmo Bowl had bright, simple colors, but most of all, it was the action that took foremost in the game, and that's what made it really exciting. While the teams in Tecmo Bowl were not real, the players were. A licensing deal with the NFL Players Association brought real name players to the game that brought an extra level of excitement. 1988, Wasteland. Role-playing games have been around since the 1970s, first in pen and paper form, and then in computer games. But mostly, they're fantasy games, things taking place in dungeons with spells and wizards. Wasteland was different, not set in a fantasy world, but in a post-apocalyptic landscape, one that was filled not only with a little horror, but also a lot of humor as well.
1989, Tetris. Tetris was originally created by Soviet designer Alexei Pajitnov in 1984 on an Electronica 60 minicomputer. But it wasn't until its release in 1989 on Nintendo's Game Boy handheld that it achieved real worldwide success. The title is a combination of the Greek word tetra for 4 and tennis. It also has its origins in the game Pentamenos, where players take puzzle pieces and fit them together in a box-like puzzle. Tetris became famous as a game that was easy to play but difficult to master. Tetris is still probably the most popular puzzle game on the market. It's something that people can enjoy not only on their computers, but also on mobile handheld devices. It's a game you can play really quickly while you're waiting for the bus.
1990, Microsoft Windows Solitaire. When we think of computer games, we don't usually think of card games. But perhaps the most popular computer game of all time was a card game, Microsoft Solitaire, introduced with Windows 3.0 operating system. The game was crucial, not only in ensuring that people wasted millions of hours of time playing this addicting game, but also teaching them how to use a mouse, a device that was completely new to many people, and so they could learn how to click, drag, and do other things with this device by playing a game.
I totally don't play that while I'm at work, do you?
No, not at all. No, never have. Never have.
1991, Sonic the Hedgehog. In the early 1990s, Sega and Nintendo were locked in a battle for the hearts and minds of their console fan base. Sega wanted to paint Nintendo as a console for children. They decided to have an in-house design contest to create a brand new character. They came up with the idea of this blue hedgehog codenamed Mr. Needlemouse, who became Sonic the Hedgehog. With Sonic the Hedgehog, they attempted to appeal to an older audience, with someone who was more hip, cool, resonated with Gen X. Then with the advent of the Sega Genesis, and especially with Sonic the Hedgehog in 1991, Sega vaulted forward and just absolutely dominated the 16-bit console market.
1992, Mortal Kombat. Never before has there been a game that's created so much excitement, or maybe I should say controversy. Mortal Kombat was a fighting game with over-the-top graphic violence that today looks tame, but back then outraged people. Some of those people were US senators. The result was not only a wildly popular game, but Senate hearings that led to the development of the ESRB, the rating code that continues to govern video games today. Mortal Kombat's violence was not so much disturbing to some people because it was realistic. Ripping the spine out of your opponent is not necessarily realistic, but it was because it was so gratuitous, and also because there was a feeling that it was marketed to children. Who a game is marketed to is sometimes important in determining how people react to it as what it actually contains. Mortal Kombat helped not only boost the fighting game scene, but also create an interest in games that really were spectacles at the arcade. Games like Street Fighter II would be ones in which players competed to see who was the best. Mortal Kombat has an important legacy not only for its socio-political effects, but also just for its effects in the game world itself. 1993, Doom. Anyone who played Doom when it first came out will never forget the experience. This was just mesmerizing, adrenaline boosting, sheer joy of blasting away these enemies coming at you. Its first-person perspective was revolutionary, and as revolutionary was the way it's distributed. The digital shareware, people could download the first chapter, play it, and get hooked. John Carmack and John Romero were the geniuses who set this ammo-blasting, adrenaline-fueled, action-packed adventure set to heavy metal music that really just turned the video game industry upside down. Doom popularized the first-person shooter, showing how compelling it could be to look down the barrel of your gun at enemies swarming at you. It was a game that was impossible to turn away from, and you just had to keep playing as long as you survived.
1994, Super Metroid. Super Metroid is widely considered the best game in the entire Metroid franchise. As bounty hunter Samus, you're on this isolated spaceship going through trying to capture pirates. Players of the original Metroid probably remember that big reveal at the end. Samus was a girl. Samus wasn't the first female protagonist in a video game, but she certainly did become the most popular, especially of the era, and was the first to really be seen as a non-sexualized character. When she's in her armor, you really don't care whether she's male or female. She's just awesome. Super Metroid was one of the first games to have multiple endings. 3 in this particular case. And it became very popular in speedrunning communities as they raced to beat the clock to get the best ending possible.
1995, Command & Conquer. Command & Conquer wasn't the first real-time strategy game from Westwood, but it was the game that brought together in a perfect combination all the elements of skill, strategy, and speed that make for a good real-time strategy game today. Command & Conquer really showed other manufacturers that RTSs, real-time strategy games, had an audience who just craved the excitement of trying to defeat your opponent while so many things are happening all around you.
1996, Tomb Raider. 1996 was actually a really big year for video games, with releases of epics like Diablo and Resident Evil.
Watch out! It's a monster!
Let me take care of this.
But we picked Tomb Raider for one huge reason, and her name is Lara Croft. Lara was this no-nonsense Indiana Jones-esque character. She was doing everything that the traditional action hero did, except that she was doing it in hot pants. As awesome as Lara was, she can sometimes be seen as a sex symbol as well. Tomb Raider really set the standard for 3D video games, with the ability for characters to move in every direction, to jump, climb, swing, and in this particular case, find some pretty cool treasure. 1997, Final Fantasy VII. When Hironobu Sakaguchi released the original Final Fantasy, it wasn't the first role-playing game, but it was really the first to take it to the next level. But in 1997, when Square published the 7th iteration of their Final Fantasy genre, it really broke the mold. Prior to this, role-playing games were mostly super popular in Japan. Final Fantasy VII exploded the role-playing genre in America and Europe. The game allowed you to explore lots of different areas, and as one of these original 4 heroes of light, as you tried to go out and save the world from destruction, you were able to explore different areas, find treasure, and level up all of your weapons and gear. If you started out as a fighter, you definitely had a cooler sword by the end. With characters like Cloud Strife, the devilishly handsome Sephiroth, and Aerith, whose death unfortunately remains one of the most tear-inducing moments in video game history. "1998, Pokémon Red and Blue. 1998 was a big year for Nintendo. They released what's considered sometimes the most popular game of all time, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. But in this case, we're going to talk about a different game, a smaller one, that changed the way portable play worked. You might be a little confused as to why we're introducing Pokemon in 1998, when it actually came out in Japan in 1996. That was released as Pokemon Aka to Midori, Red and Green. The original Red and Green was only released in Japan, and when it came over here, they decided to shorten it to Pokemon from the original title Pocket Monsters, because it needed to fit on the small Game Boy screen, and it was just easier to read. There was also a licensing issue, because there was a Pocket Monsters game already over here. Creator Satoshi Tajiri was this huge bug collector when he was a child, and he decided that he really wanted to give children in Japanese cities the opportunity to do their own bug collecting. He had this vision of insects crawling along the Game Link cable that connected two Game Boys together, and thus Pokemon was born. Pokemon is still considered one of the most popular RPGs of all time, and its legacy can still be seen in the 2016 augmented reality game Pokemon Go, as people walk around with their smartphones and collect Pokemon right in their backyard. Pokemon also created an entire transmedia franchise that included one of the most popular trading card games of all time, as well as anime series, movies, board games, pretty much everything you can think of. You can catch them all.
1999, Shenmue. To the non-gamer, Shenmue sounds like maybe a killer whale, but in reality, it's one of the most exciting open-world games ever created. A real pioneer, which players were lost in a world, which they could do all sorts of things, from battling enemies to racing forklifts. Shenmue liberated players to explore in ways that they hadn't really explored before. Its designer, Yu Suzuki, was a brilliant designer who knew how to make a world seem to come alive in ways that really taxed the limits of the Sega Dreamcast. For players, it was a revelation of how immersive a video game world could be. 2000, The Sims. One of the geniuses of Will Wright is that he looked for inspirations in the everyday world. His hit game SimCity drew on the way that a model train set can bring alive a miniature world. Similarly, with The Sims, he found a dollhouse, an inspiration for a new way of playing, one that really changed the way we look at how sim games work and the worlds that they can create. People have been playing with dollhouses for centuries, but The Sims brought alive worlds of players who interacted with each other, had emotions, and did mundane, everyday things like going to work or using the bathroom. The game was strangely compelling. Players spent hours building their Sims up, seeing them interact with each other, and really creating this digital world that felt alive in the realism of the emotions that the Sims felt and related to one another.
2001, Halo Combat Evolved. A game called GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 showed that first-person shooters could be successful on consoles. In 2001, when Microsoft broke into the home console market with their Xbox, they perfected it. Or at least came really, really close. Halo was a game that broke the boundaries of what a traditional first-person shooter could be. It had a sweeping plotline, a highly developed world, and characters that players really, really bonded with. It also pioneered some new game mechanics, like the idea of only being able to carry 2 weapons at a time. That forced players to assess and reassess every situation that they went into in order to make sure that they had the correct weapon. Halo became known as the Xbox's killer app, which basically means that the console might not have sold nearly so well without it. In fact, a full 50% of Xbox consoles sold in conjunction with a copy of the Halo game. Halo also became extraordinarily famous for its multiplayer, which might seem odd because it actually came out before the advent of Xbox Live, and players had to play on a local area network connection. But it allowed up to 16 people to play simultaneously, which was huge for a console at the time.
It may be an exaggeration to say that the fate of the Xbox franchise rested on Halo, but not that much of an exaggeration. The game was really instrumental in cementing not only the platform's success, but an image of what sort of player really gravitated towards the Xbox. 2002, Metal Gear Solid 2. Video games are usually built around speed, action, and less so stealth. But the Metal Gear Solid franchise really was key in bringing that game mechanic to popularity. And yet this game had its own form of stealth. Metal Gear Solid 2 reshaped the face of stealth games. Hideo Kojima's brilliant game really brought the artistry of a stealth game with its different demands on a player to a new height that hadn't been reached before. Metal Gear Solid is the most enduring stealth franchise in video games, and Metal Gear Solid 2 was key to making that happen. 2003, Call of Duty. World War II is often known as a good war, with clear protagonists and antagonists. The result is that it's easily ported over to video games, but no game has ever done it as well, perhaps, as Call of Duty. It put players in a position to fight the enemy in a way that was thrilling and at the time, highly realistic. Just as generations earlier, little kids that played with little green army men in their sandboxes, now kids all grown up have an amazing time playing in this world of World War II in which you are trying to fight the enemy and stay alive. As a franchise, Call of Duty has been a tremendous hit for Activision and some of the best-selling games of all time.
2004, World of Warcraft. In 1997, Richard Garriott coined the term massively multiplayer online role-playing game, or MMORPG for short, for his game Ultima Online. But it wasn't until 2004 when Blizzard released World of Warcraft when the genre really took hold. With its peak of 12 million players, WoW really took the internet by storm. Not only was it an easier RPG, which allowed players who maybe wouldn't be so interested in an in-depth role-playing game to play, it also made it super easy for people to catch up, with lots of XP-giving quests and not huge penalties when you die. It made novice players able to catch up to the more experienced companions a lot faster than normal. World of Warcraft is still the most iconic MMORPG on the map. When people think of MMOs, they still think of World of Warcraft first.
2005, Guitar Hero. In video games, it's all about the controller. Think about the simple Atari joystick, or the controller for the NES. But most controllers are variations on a theme. With Guitar Hero, players got something completely different. Here was a simulated guitar that anyone could pick up and know sort of what to do with pretty much right away. Guitar Hero was a party game that expanded the reach of video games. Anyone at a social gathering wanted to pick up that guitar and play and try to see how they do, even if in the end they probably didn't hit all the right notes.
2006, Wii Sports. You probably have an idea in your head when someone says, "I'm a video gamer." And the first thing you think of is probably not your 90-year-old grandmother. But when it comes to Wii Sports, you might as well think about her, because she's probably playing it, along with all of her grandkids. Wii Sports became one of the most popular sports games and one of the most popular games of all time, and launched the Nintendo Wii console to massive success. In fact, there were lots of people who were buying the Nintendo Wii who didn't even know that it could play a different game. Wii Sports helped the Nintendo Wii sell over 100 million consoles, and its motion-controlled remote and nunchuck even spurred Microsoft and Sony to design their own motion-controlled system, the Microsoft Kinect and the PlayStation Move. 2007, Portal. In 2007, Valve Corporation released a really interesting, almost funny-looking game called The Orange Box. It was a compilation of 5 games. 4 of them were first-person shooters from some of their more popular franchises, like Half-Life 2 and Team Fortress 2. And there was this short puzzle game called Portal. Surprisingly enough, that small game, which could be completed in 4 hours or less, ended up receiving more critical acclaim than the other 4 games put together. Portal had a unique gameplay system using portal guns, which allowed the player to shoot in one area and move in a different direction. So you could exit one room in one direction and enter another in the opposite direction, or in fact move through walls and ceilings. But one of the most enduring parts of Portal was its single vocalist.
Very good. A complimentary victory lift has been activated in the main chamber.
Her name was Ellen McLean, and she played a darkly sarcastic artificial intelligence named GLaDOS, who promised to navigate you through the Aperture Science Lab. And as long as you performed to her satisfaction, you would be rewarded with a delicious slice of Black Forest cake. Unfortunately, the cake was a lie. She actually tried to kill you.
2008, World of Goo. Video games, especially starting in the 1990s, were made by massive teams, pouring massive amounts of money into the development of the game. But starting in the early 2000s, new tools began to emerge that allowed single individuals or small teams to create a game. One of those games was World of Goo, a fun, splattering game that really had a playful spirit about it, and yet low-budget looking animations. The result was something attainable, yet fun, and really spurred the indie game movement that really is a key player in today's video game world. 2009, Angry Birds. It's the first game that really transcended mobile gaming, not only inspired people sometimes to buy a phone itself, but also buy lots of other merchandise inspired by the game. Angry Birds was important, not only for its popularity, but the way it brought new gamers into the fold of gaming. Someone who would never consider themselves a gamer found themselves addicted to Angry Birds, eager just to see if they could knock down those devilish pigs and really try to get to the next level in a game that was both frustrating, fascinating, and most of all, fun.
2010, STARCRAFT 2, Wings of Liberty. STARCRAFT is one of the best examples of the real-time strategy genre. Unlike a lot of the most popular real-time strategy games, it takes place in space, with 3 very distinct races: humans, Protoss, and Zerg. One of the things that set STARCRAFT apart from its contemporaries was the fact that each faction was uniquely different in how you could build your bases, lead your armies, and what your powers were. The original STARCRAFT also pioneered what we call today the e-game sports movement. The esports movement was especially popular in South Korea, but with STARCRAFT 2, it branched out and became one of the most popular esport games worldwide.
2011, Minecraft. A Lego brick affords a lot more variety to play than a talking Barbie. Both can be fun, but one opens up many more possibilities. Minecraft was the Lego brick of the video game universe. It had simple, 8-bit looking graphics that opened up a creative world for players to build things that they could imagine in ways they couldn't build in real life with those atom-based Lego bricks. The result was a game that has yielded millions of hours of gameplay as players discover the possibilities of building something on the computer screen that before they could only imagine.
2012, Journey. Set in a vast desert, where the player feels small against this wide expanse of sand and tall mountains, Journey evokes the sense of solitude and wonder. Players are allowed to communicate with each other only through chimes, not through voice or text. They can help each other, but never hinder. The game was also designed to be so simplistic that players wouldn't require any in-game instruction, so they wouldn't be taken out of their world. Journey is also known for its sweeping, evocative soundtrack, which was the first video game to be nominated for a Grammy Award.
(2013) The Last of Us. Early video games were long on play and short on story. There's not much story in Donkey Kong. It's a damsel in distress, Jumpman rescuing his love. Yet, as games have developed over time, the stories have gotten more compelling, and studios have learned how to tell those stories more effectively. The Last of Us, in some ways, hews to a very standard genre, the zombie apocalypse. With many video games, they're very artificial mechanics that move the story along. Maybe you get to a new level, for instance, or your character gains new abilities. With The Last of Us, you were in the story always, as your main character and the girl who was his sidekick went through the story, developing almost like a novel. It was compelling because it felt real, in a way that more artificial systems would not have.
2014, Destiny. Destiny was developed by Bungie, best known for their Halo franchise. And with Destiny, they created yet another hit. Perhaps best known for its persistent online world, which means that things continuously happen even when you're not logged on. Destiny creates a world where players can do their own thing, but also just randomly meet up with other people for worldwide events. Maybe there's a boss fight that pops up, or a raid that needs to be completed. Everyone can interact, or you can ignore it and just keep on doing what you're doing. The choice is up to you. Bungie also made a commitment with Destiny that it was going to be continuously updated. They said until the end of time, but probably at least until the company goes out of business. Because of that, Destiny receives continuous updates and support, so players never have to worry that they're going to run out of new content. 2015, Undertale. Most video games are developed by a whole crowd of people, or at the very least one or two. Undertale was developed, published, written, and composed by a single person, Toby Fox. He created a game that he wanted to play, and if there was an element in a game that he didn't like, he just didn't include it. So for example, he hated fetch quests because it made you go back and retread old ground. He also hated being forced to grind for experience points. So none of those things appeared in Undertale. One thing that did, however, was a very interesting game mechanic that allowed you 3 choices whenever you faced a monster. You could fight them and kill them like you normally would in a video game, but you could also choose to flee, or you could choose to befriend them. And depending on your choice, and your various choices throughout the game, you received a different ending. That could sometimes even continue on to subsequent plays if you decided to play the game over again.
2016, That Dragon Cancer. When Trip Hawkins first started Electronic Arts, he ran a series of ads that asked the question, can a game make you cry? With That Dragon Cancer, there was a game that really had the potential to move players to tears. In large part because it was based on the real-life experience of the developer who lost his son. That Dragon Cancer brought to the video game the tragedy and sometimes the tedium of what it was like to wait with a sick child, to experience that. It's a game that anyone who played it could not forget. And it's a game that began to show the power of the medium as it developed to bring new senses of what was possible in video games. New ways to move players, and new ways to show the artistry and the pathos that is possible in video games. 2017, Fortnite. The most important games sometimes aren't the first games to adapt a certain medium. Take the Battle Royale mode of video games. Fortnite was not the first game to use a Battle Royale mode, in which you're the last player standing. Think of something like Hunger Games, for instance. But something about Fortnite was compelling. Well, maybe that something was the fact that it was free to play. And also the fact that it had graphics that were accessible to anyone. Meanwhile, a circle is shrinking, limiting the amount of space you can go, meaning that in the end, only one person will survive. It was not the first Battle Royale game, but something about the game, that combination of fast action, of suspense, of accessible graphics, and the free-to-play mode, made it a video game phenomenon, brought new players in, brought players of all ages together to play.
2018, Celeste. Some games you just enjoy playing. There's not really as much rhyme or reason for it, you just really like it. Celeste tended to be one of those, with the gamers for whom it was popular. Celeste had some interesting game mechanics that allowed you to do things like double dash in midair. It wasn't the first game to do that, but combined with the fact that each room was its own individual puzzle, it made everything feel faster, stronger. And it also allowed for a great deal of replayability, since each room had maybe a different way to play it. Several rooms also had hidden cassette tapes. If you found the cassette tape, it would unlock a B-side to the level, which was a harder version. If you beat every single B-side, it unlocked a C-side and allowed you to play an even harder version, basically allowing for almost endless replayability of the game. But what really hooked a lot of players to Celeste was the protagonist herself, a young girl named Madeline, who was trying desperately to scale a mountain. She kept being hindered by a reflection of herself that she called a piece of me. It turned out that this piece of her was a metaphor for her own internal anxiety and depression. And it was only by combining the two aspects of herself that she was able to finally scale the mountain, which is a really interesting metaphor, I think, for most of us.
That was every iconic game for the past 40 years.
We hope you learned something and had some fun doing it. We'll look forward to seeing what the next 40 years bring.